Hey everybody, today I'll be doing my annual talk through of my entire board game collection. I think this is quite a nice video to do because obviously I play a lot of new games each year and some of those games are excellent and don't end up staying in my collection because I don't have the particular need for it in my collection. So I'll try to be as brief as I can because I've got about 200 games here to go through. So yeah, I'll try and stay focused. So first up, this main shelf here is a lot of my more involved Euros. This top shelf is a bit of an exception. But we've got Isle of Skye here. This is a tile placement game by Alexander Pfister that replaced Carcassonne for me. Really enjoy this one. El Caballero as well, another little tile placement game that is massively overlooked, considering this is like a companion game to El Grande. But this one uses the same initiative system with the cards, but has a tile placement element to it. A Capital Lux 2, which is one of my favourite card games, if not my favourite card game. Kind of a blackjack variant with lots of different abilities and things. Wonderful game. We've got Viceroy, a game where you're building this pyramid of cards, and depending on where you build these cards on the pyramid, the more bonuses you get. Points galore in this one, a lot of fun. We've got a classic with modern art there. This is like a bidding style game as you're trying to collect artwork from these different artists and get points accordingly. You've got Nova Luna, which is actually one of the only Uwe Rosenberg games I enjoy, believe it or not. So despite me loving my Euros, Uwe's not really a designer who resonates with me, but Nova Luna was a nice light one from a couple of years ago that I did enjoy. We've got Nidavellir. Very fun set collection and bidding style game, and probably one of my favourite set collection games, full stop. Just loads of different ways to score points and it's very satisfying. I've got Pasha, which is an older Stefan Dora game, a little kind of Yahtzee variant. Very light but quite fun. We've got Hadrian's Wall, which is a very involved kind of flip and right style game. Loads of combos, pretty spreadsheet-ish, but again, a lot of fun. I've even got a little Geek and Son dice tower here, which I never use, which I really need to start using. Going down then, we've got a big game here with Glenmore 2 Chronicles. So we mentioned a couple of great tile placement games here. This one is probably my favourite tile placement game of all time. Basically building this big bunch of tiles and you're scoring points and managing resources. But I love the way you've got to be nice and tight with this game because if you make too many tiles, then you're going to score some negative points at the end of the game. Wonderful game. Talking of wonderful games, we have Keyflower, a brilliant worker placement bidding hybrid. I think one of the best games out there. And a lot of these games actually are amongst my favourites. So we have Underwater Cities, a big kind of engine building, Tableau builder, combos galore, kind of like a terraforming Mars style of game, but by Vladimir Suki, and I really like this one. We've got Trois, a pretty confrontational or quite a mechanical and dry dice drafting style game as you are using these dice to activate different cards. Loads of variability, excellent game. Forense, which was a game I was after for a long time. This one actually did get reprinted a few years back by Quined. This one is a tower building game. Try to build these tall towers and get commissions. Some really good tension and player interaction. Citrus, another massively underrated tile placement game. Pretty abstract, but it's got a good management of keeping things on your personal board but presence on the main board because you get incentivized for doing either. Wonderful game. Grand Austria Hotel, one of my favourite dice drafting games, and I will say a lot of these games are dice drafters because it's probably my favourite mechanism. This one, there is like one where you're trying to manage a hotel, feeding your guests, sending them off to their rooms happy, lots of combos. Newton, by Nestor Mangoni and Simone Luciani, and a lot of my games are from Luciani because I think he's brilliant. This one is, I think, underrated actually, and the Cranio design. One where you're climbing tech trees, got some really cool card play and combos. Lorenzo Il Magnifico, one of my favourite worker placement style games where the strength of your workers is dictated by the roll of dice, or the dice values, but that applies to all the different players. Lots of engine building, some very satisfying kind of combos and things you can do. Just a brilliant game. Hansa Teutonica, one that I only actually played semi-recently when the big box came out. This one, very streamlined route building game. Some great, another good degree of engine building with this one. I think it's fantastic. Really grown on me this last year, and I can see this one really coming up high on my rankings next year. Marco Polo 2, which replaced the original Marco Polo, or the Voyages of Marco Polo, when this one came out. Another dice placement style game with lots of asymmetric player powers, so each game feels very different. Terra Mystica, a bit of a gamer's game really, one where you're trying to increase your presence on the board and kind of utilise the powers of your individual fantasy race. Next shelf then we have Last Will. This is an older Vladimir Suki game, a worker placement one. This one kind of fits a weird niche in my collection where it caters to lighter worker placement enjoyers. One where you're trying to waste as much money as you can. So it's got a really cool endgame condition and you're just buying houses and selling them for a big loss and doing all these lavish things. Really good theme and it's a lot of fun. We've got Boone Lake. This is the latest Alexander Pfister game. This is almost like Alexander Pfister's take on Terra Mystica. Getting presents on the board and getting income each round. Very good fun. Tinner's Trail. Well, this little bit here is my kind of Martin Wallace section. So we've got Tinner's Trail. Nice economic game where you're trying to bid for these different mines, trying to get the metal out of those mines, but also trying to get rid of the water, because the more water in those mines, the more expensive it's going to be to extract the metal. Really cool concept and surprisingly easy to play considering the depth in that one. Anno 1800, another kind of spreadsheet tech tree style game. Lots going on here, but you're just trying to basically satisfy your people by building these tech trees, and you can utilise the tech trees of other players. Brass Birmingham, one of his, well, probably Martin Wallace's biggest title by far, to be honest. A kind of route building, economic style game. We've got Pulsar 2849, which is another Vladimir Suki design, another dice drafter, but one that's a real point salad style game. You get points for everything in this one. Cool technologies and things you can unlock, and I love that dice drafting system where if you take the higher numbers you're going to move down on a track, which is going to kind of forfeit you some bonuses than if you go the other way. Praga Caput Regni, this was probably my favourite game of 2020 or 2020 I think. This one is a strange one because it doesn't really do anything particularly unique or different, but kind of being a full, well-packaged game, this is probably amongst my favourite games ever. It's that good. We got Signorie, a game that I haven't played for a long time actually. This is from Watch Your Game. Another dice placement style game, or dice drafter. Again, lots of potential for upgrades and things. So you can see a lot of my games are dice driven and have some degree of engine building to them. And Signorie is another example of that. You're trying to kind of go up tracks by using your sons, and also marry your daughter off to all these different kind of nobility. So a lot of fun. We've got Istanbul, the big box version. This one is kind of a bit lighter than actually a lot of these games on the shelf, but this one just has never, I've never kind of waned on my enthusiasm for Istanbul. Kind of a little worker movement style game, a racing style game. You're trying to collect resources and trade them in to get these rubies, and it's a race to get to a certain amount of rubies. Maracaibo, so more Alexander Pfister here. This one is definitely my favourite Alexander Pfister game. It's almost like a rondel style game where you're using cards to do things. It's got a really cool mechanism where you can invest in these different nations, and it's got this kind of like stocks and shares system, which is really interesting. And this other shelf down here, the final shelf of this particular bookcase, we got Coimbra, another dice drafting game. This one uses the idea that you're not only drafting dice based on the pip values, but also based on the colour of those dice, because they're going to let you climb tracks and use different things such as getting money and points. Trismegistus is like the evolution of a game like Coimbra, because that one you're not only using the symbol on the dice, the colour of the dice, but also the amount of dice in that pool as well. So this one is one of my favourite games of all time. Very heavy. I don't get to the table terribly often, but when I do, it's always a big hit for me. Tzolk'in, the Mayan Calendar, and you can see here this is actually all my kind of little T-series section. Tzolk'in the Mayan Calendar was probably the first Euro game I've ever played, and it's still my favourite worker placement game, at least in kind of a pure context. As you're placing these workers on the board, letting them kind of leave on them there on these wheels, on these cogs, and the longer they're on these cogs, the better bonuses you get when you take them off the board. Just a brilliant concept that's never been replicated. Teotihuacan, a big rondel style game. Again, lots of ways to score points, climbing tracks, and that kind of applies to Kenyu as well. So these are all Daniele Ticini games, who's another one of my favourite designers. And the way he uses dice is just outstanding. And this T-series has been fantastic. But believe it or not, the newest one, Tabanusi, was not a big hit for me, so that was quite strange. It kind of broke the pattern, and that one was not a keeper. Talented Suyu was a bit of a strange one, because this one is like almost like a sister game to this T-series, but this is by David Turtzi. A very intimidating worker placement game, but this has always been a hit for me. Despite me thinking I would have problems with it, I've yet to really find a problem with it. So I'm still really enjoying that one. And that concludes this shelf, so let's move on to the next one. So this shelf here is where all my Stefan Feld games are kept. So I've got quite a lot of them here, and I've even got some more on another shelf. So I have Luna, one of his most underrated games, not really talked about anymore, this one. Very strange game, but very good. Bonfire, Trajan, Aquasphere, Oracle of Delphi, In the Year of the Dragon, Castles of Burgundy, and even Bora Bora, which I picked up recently. Stefan Feld is one of my favourite designers ever. and all of his games just click with me. Very mechanical, very weird and out there, but they all just do something a bit different. Like Trajan uses this really cool Mount Carla system. Atmosphere has like a programming element to it. Oracle of Delphi is like a pick up and deliver style game where you're trying to race to get all these objectives done, and it uses a lot of mechanisms that are shared with the Castles of Burgundy, which is one of his more popular point salad style games, but it uses the same dice system, but they still feel very different. But I'm surprised this one didn't take off as much as the Burgundy did, because I think I actually prefer it. In the Year of the Dragon is a very different change of pace for Stefan Feld. This is like a game where you're trying to overcome all these hardships, and scoring points and doing well in this game is very difficult. A very punishing game, but it's brilliant. And Bora Bora, another weird kind of point salad style game that has a good thread of strategy, because you always have to be trying to fulfill these objectives that come out each round. And we've got Puerto Rico as well, which is obviously not a Stefan Feld game, but this one is one of the classic Euros. I love this role selection game, and I just think it's a fascinating design and definitely well deserved of being considered one of the best Euros of all time. Below that shelf we have just a few games here, so I've still got some room on this shelf, which is quite nice. We've got Meermies, talk about underrated. This is a really cool worker placement game about running an ant colony. So you're basically trying to move these ant rounds, collect resources, and use these pheromones to move your ants around faster. Really cool game, very different. Ys, which is another game by Astari, the same publisher as Meermies. I think this game is so much fun, and it should be a big hit. I think maybe the graphic design has worked against it on this one. It's not the best of box covers, but I think there is a different version. This is like a really cool, almost like a blind bidding and area control style game, or kind of bluffing style game with a commodity speculation element to it in terms of the points. Very easy to play, but it's got it just offers so much enjoyment. That is Ys. We've got Orleans, kind of considered a bit of a modern classic amongst Eurogamers. This is like a bag building style game, as you're putting these tokens in the bag, pulling them out and activating different action spots to get different objectives, coverage of the board, climbing tracks, really good fun. And Goa as well, which is another kind of a grail game for me that I had, or was after for a long time. This is an older Really Good Dawn game, and one that not really many people play or talk about anymore, because I know it is very much out of print. But this is like a really cool bidding style game. You're navigating around this grid of tiles, which will determine which are coming out for auction later. Then you're upgrading your player board and getting points in different ways. It's so much fun and a real classical Euro feel. There's not much going on this shelf. This is just some games that I'm having to review soon. We've got Spirit Island, involved cooperative game where you're trying to control these spirits with different powers and fight for all these different kind of settlers. It's good fun, massive brain burner. Cartagena, one kind of a point-to-point movement style game, as you're using the places or position of other people on the board to move up and trying to get all your prisoners to escape jail. New York Zoo, very simple Uwe Rosenberg tile placement game, a polyomino style game. And we've even got an older Really Good Dawn game here called Emerald, almost like a more of a traditional game. Below that we've got a lot of fillers. So we have Sweetlandia. So Sweetlandia was one actually that I've reviewed recently. This one is surprisingly good. Got no fanfare whatsoever when this one came out. It's a game a bit similar to a game like For Sale, where you're blind bidding to collect cards and you're scoring set collection bonuses. Boomerang, which is one of the pioneers in terms of like flip and write, or this is like a draft and write style game. We've got Point Salad, one that's really grown on me. I kind of really enjoyed the simplicity of this one. Just a drafting game, scoring points in lots of different ways. 10, which is a recent push your luck style game. I'm not sure if this is going to be a long-term keeper. I think it might be a little bit overwrought, but you're just trying to collect sets of numbers and a push your luck mechanism. Skull and Cabo are very strange, a bit of anomalies in my collection, because on paper these games sound like I would hate them. They're both brilliant in practice. This Skull is like a bluffing style game, as you're trying to see how many coasters you can flip over without trying to discover a skull. And Cabo is basically a memory game, as you're trying to shed as many high cards as you can and try to commit to scoring when you think you have the lowest. Treelings, very simple little card builder, I suppose, trying to collect these columns of cards. Dragon Master is an older Knizia two-player game, as you're building up this grid of cards, and one person's playing horizontally, one's playing vertically, and you score points in different ways depending on the cards you play. Elements, which is like a blackjack variant. It's almost like an entry-level or more intro version of a game like Capital Lux, but very simple, only plays in about 10 minutes, but it works. Hounded, an abstract style game with a weird theme, as you're like this fox hunter, and one person's the fox and one's like the hunter, and you're trying to trap the fox if you are the hunter. Cool theme. Not massively sold on it, but I do like it's different. This game here, Startups, is a massively underrated little card game, a little stocks and shares style game with some real cool play attention. Insider, which is like a variant on 21 Questions basically, but with a hidden, or someone undercover trying to help their team. And you've got Matryoshka as well, another little underrated set collection style game, as you're displaying new cards each time you play. Below this shelf, we have some even smaller games. Ohanami, one of my favourite fillers and drafting games, as you're trying to build these runs of cards. But the more you play on the table, the more restrictive your cards get. The Mind, a little... This one really is a strange one because I don't really play this one anymore, but I do have some nostalgic feelings with this one. As you're basically trying to play these cards in order, not trying to break that pattern. We got 6 Nimpt and No Thanks, and even Coloretto. These for me are amongst absolutely essential filler games. Scale fantastically, great decisions in literally the lightest rule set you'll ever imagine. These are all downright essentials, and I highly recommend if you're starting a collection to pick all 3 of these up as a starting point. Pungi is almost the same, but it's not quite as juicy in terms of the decisions. We've got Villagers and Streets here by Sinister Fish. I'm not sold on these games either, to be honest. I think they are okay. You might ask why they're in my collection. It's because I share my collection with my brother and he seems to enjoy these. One's like a tile placement game that doesn't really do much different than any other tile placement. And Villagers is like it's kind of like a little tech tree builder, as you're trying to get these more people into your village and score points in different ways. They just work fine and they're nothing special, but they are in the collection. 2 games here by Button Shy. We've got Agropolis and Sprawlopolis. So these are little card placement games as you're trying to overlap things and score points in different ways depending on the current game setup. That's just a standard pack of cards. And we've got all the different kind of expansion material for Agropolis and Sprawlopolis there. And the bottom shelf here is more party games. So we've got Fiesta de los Muertos, which is a cooperative word association style games. You're trying to give clues to link to a dead person. It works quite well. Tifa Tashin, which is kind of one of my grail games in my collection. This one is massively unavailable in this form. A negotiation style game, as you are trying to extort as much money as you can and be the person who's the richest at the end of the game. This has been reprinted under the skin called Good Critters, so if you like negotiation games, I highly recommend you check that one out. It's a lot of fun. Trap Words, another great party game, team versus team one. Letter Jam, a cooperative word deduction game, works surprisingly well. Decrypto, which replaced Codenames for me. I don't really play this one as much as I would like, but I do think it's a very clever design. Again, a layer heavier and more complex than Codenames, but it's definitely worth the extra effort. Just One and So Clover, 2 great word association games from last year and the year before. Big hits amongst my group and my parents. And The Resistance Avalon, which I think might just be one of the only social deduction games I still have, and it's still my favourite. On the top here, I have all the games I've yet to play, so I'm not going to go too much into these. I'll just literally read out the names. But I have recently done a Shelf of Shame talk through, so be sure to check out that video if you want to know a bit more about them. But we have Unusual Suspects, Valletta, Ulm, Steam Time, Murano, Zhanguo, The Golden Ages, Kalos, Brussels 1893, which I got at a very good price, but there is a reprint coming out. Archipelago. We have the Agora expansion to Seven Wonders Duel, Peep Mats, Aladdin's Dragons, Hanabi, Game of Thrones, Hamburgum, Antique 2, Keyflower the Merchants expansion, Scylla, Amiitis, Metropolis. These all came together with Mirmies and Ys. I bought them as a job lot of Astari games, which I've really not regretted doing because they're all fantastic. The Princess of Florence, which has been reprinted as Colosseum, which I used to have, but I got this one at such a good price, I thought I'll try it and see if it's different. Dungeon Pets, El Capitan, which is an older Wolfgang Kramer game. Agra, Cooper Island. We've got the Merchants of the Sea expansion to Terra Mystica. We've got Crystal Palace, First Contact, and Polis. Some on top here as well with Nefertiti, Rumble Nation, and Glasgow. So under all those games I haven't played is a Kallax, which is almost full. We've got Amerigo, which is another Stefan Feld game, but it wouldn't fit on this shelf quite so nicely. One of my favourite Felds, so this is a brilliant little tile placement game that uses a cube tower to determine the actions you take. Highly recommended. I've got Merlin, the Deluxe Big Box, a game that I really love. I think this game has a real good Stefan Feld feel to it, but it feels like a more classical game as well. Everything you'll ever need for Merlin in this big box, and I've really yet to explore all of it. I need to dig into that one. Here we've got some kind of Gateway Plus level style games. So we've got Fruticola, a game that came out last year, massively underrated, a brilliant worker placement and kind of stock manipulation style game. Brilliant about kind of creating these jams and things. Great gameplay, horrific production. Coco Pelli, which is Stefan Feld's latest game I have in my collection. Again, it doesn't quite fit with the other ones because this has the more square queen box, but really nice card-driven game. Bastille, a nice, like a medium lightweight worker placement game that works quite well. Picture Perfect is an interesting one, as you're trying to create this perfect family photos. It's like a deduction and spatial puzzle that's really interesting, very accessible, but a lot of fun. I've got two of my favourites here. We've got Rococo, the Deluxe Edition. So this is a beautiful game by Eagle Griffin, a Matthias Kramer design that's not terribly complex, but it's really cool as you're designing all these costumes and things and sending them off to these nobles to go to the ball and getting area majorities. Probably the most beautiful game I have. It's absolutely stunning, and I'll if you don't know anything about this game, I recommend you look at it because it's just gorgeous. Barrage, one of my favourite games of all time, about converting water into energy. Very cutthroat and confrontational, which is a bit of a change for me because I don't normally like too aggressive and cutthroat games, but this one just works. Cannot find anything wrong with this game. I love it. It is just amazing. Below that row, we have a bunch of these slim boxes here, which at first were really annoying to store, but once you've got a few of them, they store quite nicely. So Free Ride, which is a Freedom and Freeze game, it's kind of like his twist on a game like Ticket to Ride. Really good train game, lots of good interaction. Concordia, one of the best Euro games of all time, a little hand management style game and resource management. We've got Fayum, massively underrated Freedom and Freeze design about building up this civilization, I suppose, communally. It has a card system very similar to Concordia, actually, where you have to play a card to pick up all your existing cards, except this one puts an additional twist on it, where you have to pay more money to draw more cards into your hand. Fast Sloths, another Freedom and Freeze game, and Power Grid as well. So this is really awkward Freedom and Freeze shaped boxes. But this is like a pick up and deliver racing style game, and Power Grid, an economic classic. And below that we have Navigador, by Matt Gertz, who designed Concordia. This one is almost as good as Concordia, but doesn't really get looked and lives in the shadow of Concordia. But another great kind of supply and demand exploration style game that's just brilliant fun. And to the side of that we have Peloponnese, which is another hard game to get hold of, but a game kind of coming over all these different risks and things that come out and can affect your little civilization. Just a really good game about weathering the storm. To the right of that square we have some Reiner Knizia and also Docmus. So Docmus almost feels like a Reiner Knizia game. It's like one of those classic point-to-point movement games. You're building these routes, but this one you have a lot of manipulation because the board is built up of tiles and you can rotate them and flip them and move them. Really good. Babylonia, which is my favourite of that genre. This one you're basically trying to connect all these different cities together, score big bonuses, get ongoing player powers and things. This game is as good as it gets. I love Babylonia. Tigris and Euphrates, Knizia classic. Nothing else quite like this one. Played this one recently and still really enjoy it. That's Tigris and Euphrates. And Witchstone, which is actually the most recent Knizia game I have. And one of the most involved games he's made in a while, actually. I know this is a co-design that uses that ingenious system where you're matching up symbols, trying to get bigger bonuses. And this one, you get points in lots of different ways. So it's a bit of a point-salad game, but it's very satisfying and a lot of fun. One of my favourite from last year. Talking about my favourites from last year, we have Arc Nova, certainly the hotness at the moment at the time of this recording. Big, grandiose game about building a zoo, but it's surprisingly intuitive and the theme comes through massively. And you might see from all these games that theme is not really my thing, but theme with Arc Nova just works wonderfully. It really does help teach the game and it's just brilliant fun. We've got El Grande, the big box here, which surprisingly enough, I've only actually ever played with the core game. I've never used any of the expansion material or the big box stuff. And despite that, it's still my favourite game of all time. Brilliant, classic area majority style game that's just yet to be improved upon, in my opinion, despite being 25 years old. Below that we have Wallenstein, another big box, another Queen big box. Very confrontational war style game, but with a Euro twist on it as you're programming all your moves beforehand, and another game that uses the cube tower like Amerigo does, but this one you're using it to resolve battles. A lot of fun, very clever, but I do have to be in the right mood to play that one. And below this one we have a bit of a strange bag here with Mercado de Lisboa. This is a Vital Lacerda game. It's kind of a fragment of his bigger game, Lisboa. Not keen on that one, bit of an abstract, but it's not great. Chinatown, which is probably my favourite negotiation style games. You're trying to build up these buildings and generate income, and you can negotiate pretty much everything. So if you like negotiation, that is the one to go to. We got Letters from Whitechapel, which is a really cool twist on the Scotland Yard mechanism. You've got one person playing Jack the Ripper, and one person or players playing the police officers who are trying to catch Jack. Works really well, nice and streamlined. We've got the original Libertalia, which was very rare, but now it's kind of been reprinted by Stonemaier as the Winds of Galecrest. So it'll be interesting to see the changes. I like this game. It's a bit chaotic for me, but it still does what it does quite well. We've got the Chronicles of Crime with all the expansion material. Yet to play that one in a while, actually. So we played the original ones. We've dabbled with a bit with the film noir versions, but we still need to play a lot more of it. Here we've got some more family-friendly style games. We've got Meadow, which is a game I bought for my girlfriend, actually, and we only played it a few times and yet to play it since, really. So it's been sat there, but I promised not to sell it without her knowing, so need to play that one a bit more. We've got My Farm Shop, massively underrated, really good Dawn game with one of the most horrible box covers you'll ever see, but don't know that to tell you, the gameplay is brilliant, and it's definitely the best version of the Machikoro space-based mechanism as you're rolling dice to activate different cards. This one does it just so well. It's a lot of fun. Fiesta Mexicana, it's a bidding style game. It's a bit weird. I think it tries a bit too hard to be different and it doesn't quite pull it off. Garum is a game that is very interesting, one that nobody talks about, but it's rock solid. You're building up this grid of tiles, trying to create these rows and columns of your symbol, but creating rows and columns for other people in the process. It's really good. Fearsome Floors is a weird, another Friedman freestyle game. Feels like a bit more of a family-friendly style game. You're trying to get your team of people out of this dungeon with this monster's going around catching you. It's fine. It's nothing special. So we've got some Kramer and Kiesling here with Miyabi, which I think is probably a borderline essential tile placement style game as you're trying to build up, not only get majorities on a flat level, but also you can build them up vertically to get points in different ways and score bigger multipliers. Great fun. Mexica, an abstract area majority style game, one I've had in my collection for years and years and years, and it's still great. Renature, another area control majority style game that uses dominoes as a mechanism. Again, works really well. This one bridges a great gap between being a gateway game and something more involved and more cutthroat. And Savannah Park was one that came out last year, which is one of those games you're surprised it hasn't existed before, because you are just simply trying to move this puzzle of different animals around, trying to get all the animals together in these clusters and multiply their points by these watering holes. Works very well. Below that, we have a few games here that I don't play very often. We've got Sheriff of Nottingham, which normally comes out in, when we have 5 or 6 players. Classic negotiation style game. Mysterium, which is a weird game you're trying to get your teammates to guess which characters and locations they are to basically point towards this murderer. We always play this as Dixit because we think Dixit's a bit better. And below that we have Museum, which is quite a cool set collection game, very beautiful. Haven't played that one in a while because we've been waiting for the new rule set and the additional stuff to come through the Kickstarter, which has been delayed by years. More party games here to the right with Telestrations, absolute classic, one of my favourite party games ever. Crossed Words and Crossed Clues are 2 brilliant word association games that I highly recommend checking out. Concept, which has really grown on me. This is like a bit like charades, really, but you're using the board to point towards your clues. When I Dream, a really cool game where you're trying to mislead people or get the person with the blindfold on to guess the specific word you're after. And Wits and Wages as well, another absolutely amazing party game, one of the best ones out there, as you're doing trivia, but you can bet on other people knowing the answers, which is a really cool twist on that concept. And on to the final shelf here. So this is where a lot of my lighter games are, or more accessible games. So we have Push here. Still, I think, one of the best push your luck games ever. So many games try to knock this one off its perch, but they're never as good. Chiseled, which is quite an interesting kind of deck deconstruction game. Nearly there, didn't quite pull it off. High Society, classic bidding Knizia, absolutely brilliant filler, again, borderline essential. Break the Code is a strange one because this one is a game I'm awful at. This one really does frazzle my brain, but a brilliant mathematical deduction game that does what it does so well, but I need to be kind of in a good headspace to play it, because if I'm tired of something, I'm just not going to do well. Hokkaido, another game that uses the Sporopolis Agropolis system, which you're trying to overlap cards. I think the other games do it better, to be honest. Hex Roller is a bit of a very generic looking game, but this one does quite well. A simple roll and write that does what it does, again, surprisingly well, plays in a nice amount of time. Stellar and Subastral are two recent filler games that have really done well for me. I love these two games. Both by the same design duo, Matt Riddle and Ben Pinchback. One's a strictly two-player game, one's a more straightforward set collection game, but both fantastic fillers that I highly recommend checking out. Age of War, one game that you probably wouldn't normally be in my collection. It's just simple Yahtzee-style games. You're trying to roll these dice in order to collect these different objective cards, but you can win them off each other. My girlfriend loves this game. It's probably one of her favourites. And I like it because she enjoys it. We have Mr. Cabbagehead's Garden, which I've only played a couple of times, actually. Quite a nice little puzzly solo game. And we have Archaeology, the New Expedition. This is a nice little set collection game where you're pushing your luck, because the bigger sets you collect, you have bigger risk of losing from these sandstorms that come out. We've got Fugitive here, really cool two-player deduction style game. QE, another auction style game where you can bid whatever you want. A lot of fun. Mantis Falls is one I haven't played yet. Don't really know too much about it, so I can't really say much more than that. Parade, another hugely underrated clever card game, as you're collecting cards based on the queuing system, which I've never seen before. Flea Market, a game that sounds awful on paper, works very well in practice. Basically bidding for these different items based on these dice rolls, and if those numbers get rolled again, then you can end up gaining quite a bit of money. Hanamakoji, one of the best two-player games of all time, I split you choose style mechanism. Air, Land and Sea, another great two-player game. Super Skill Pinball, really cool concept of this one, as you're trying to score as many points as you can by on these different pinball tables. So it's a roll and write style game. Takes a little bit too long, but other than that, the gameplay is fun. We've got a Game of Thrones Betwixt, which I've only played the once actually at this point. This is another kind of a bidding style game. You're trying to claim the influence over these characters, and it uses the Between Two Cities mechanism. And it does it better than Between Two Cities as well. So, and I'm a big fan of Game of Thrones. We've got For Sale, another absolutely essential auction style game, a filler game with blind bidding that just outstanding. We have Q-Birds. This one has just worked well for me. I wasn't really expecting masses from it, and it's always kind of superseded my expectations. So this is a nice little, again, another little set collection game where you have to be careful about what you leave your opponents. And Battle Line, another brilliant two-player only card game. It puts a twist on the poker game, but so much more tense, and just an absolute mainstay of my collection for many years. Below this we have Awkward Guests, my favourite deduction game by quite some distance. We have Cartographers, a nice little roll and write. This is the kind of the collector's edition one where you've got all the additional maps and things. I've got Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, a cooperative mystery solving game. Karuba, a little kind of bingo style game as you're trying to build these routes and get your people to their temples. Really good gateway style game, one of the best family weight games out there. Las Vegas Royale, what a lot of fun this game is. You're rolling a bunch of dice, trying to control influence over these different casinos and play these mini games as well as you do so. Just guaranteed a good time. That is Las Vegas Royale. Another deduction here with the Search for Planet X. Again, only played this one once, but enjoyed it massively. Way better than I thought I would. And yeah, this one uses the app integration brilliantly and a real cool logical puzzle. Escape the Aliens from Outer Space. One team's the aliens, one person's like the Marines, and you're trying to work out who's who and escape the map. And Martinique as well, which is another two-player game that uses a bit of deduction and some set collection. Below that we have Drop It, which is a cool kind of a dexterity style game as you're trying to drop these shapes in between these two perspex sheets, not getting them to touch colour to colour or shape to shape. Gods Love Dinosaurs is one that I've kind of called on. A little game where you're trying to build this little grid of tiles, then you're using those tiles to breed animals, then using animals to eat the other animals, and then dinosaurs to eat the bigger animals. It's got a weird little economy, but it works quite well. Quacks to Quedlinburg, brilliant family weight push your luck style game. Bumuntu, one that's kind of faded into obscurity actually. An abstract kind of a worker movement style game. You're collecting these different tiles of animals and you can manipulate the scoreboard. Keltis is a cool one. This one sadly is not available in English to my knowledge, so you might have to go to the German Amazon or something to get this one. This is a twist on the Lost Cities card game, but it's the board game version that caters to up to 4 players, which is quite nice, but it works very well, has a lot of the same feeling of Lost Cities. Marrakesh, a little dice rolling game, you're trying to lay these carpets down. First and Roll, this one I've not played, I've not really got much interest in playing it, it's an American football style game. And Ominos as well, another abstract dice rolling game that's quite lucky. Okay, so on to the last couple of shelves. We start off with Ship Shape. This is a really light tile placement game, or kind of a puzzly style game, as you're overlapping these foam core tiles on each other, trying to expose some symbols, cover up others, because these different symbols score in different ways. I'm so really surprised this one didn't take off, because I thought it has all the kind of ingredients to be a big hit, but I really enjoy it and it should be more popular. Ratus Cartus, simple little push your luck hand management game, which I think is a bit too lucky for me. Can't Stop, a push your luck game as you're trying to climb these different towers. You can keep going and going, but you might go bust unless you save your spot. We've got The Bunk, which is I'm really happy to have in my collection because this one was out of print for a very long time. Got reprinted last year, and this is a great niche for if you have that 5-6 player mark and you don't want to play a traditional party game. This one still works extremely well as you're gambling, trying to land on these big piles of money or trap people into going to those spots. Laugh out loud fun with The Bunk. Fantastic Factories, a simple little family with engine builder. A Dice Miner, a nice little dice drafter. We've got 5 Minute Mystery, which is a real-time deduction game. You're working together cooperatively to try and filter down who the culprit is, and you're doing that by looking for these little symbols on these icons and trying to match up on this codex thing. Quite interesting, and for a nice little 5-minute game, it's quite good fun, I suppose. Furnace was a big hit for me last year. This one has this really cool bidding system as you're bidding for these cards, but if you win the bid, you get the card in front of you in your tableau, but if you don't win, you get the resources on it. And that's a really cool, clean mechanism, and I'm really excited to see what this one holds in the future in terms of expansion content. Cryptid, very pure deduction game that's quite fragile. One mistake is going to throw this game, throw the game away. But I really do like the system as you're just trying to work out where this cryptid monster is on this map. Tumbletown, which is another lightweight family game, really, a little dice-driven tableau builder as you're trying to construct these buildings with dice, and then you can use the buildings you've built to manipulate and mitigate luck of future dice rolls. Works well, and surprisingly, I think again this is another one I thought should be a big hit because it's from the same designer as Calico, which was obviously took off massively, but this one for some reason didn't. Okay, so onto the last shelf now. We start with Biblios. I think this is an absolute essential filler game as you're trying to collect these sets of cards, but the value of those cards changes throughout the game by manipulating these dice. We've got Bristol 1350. This is a game that we really want to like because the components and the theme and stuff is so cool, but the actual gameplay is broken, the rules don't make sense, so we're kind of trying to find out and figure out the best variant to play and enjoy the game with. We've got Lost Cities, absolute classic two-player head-to-head style game, trying to create these rows of cards, but you start with negative points and you're sharing the cards with other people. Absolute classic. Arboretum, a ferocious little tableau builder as you're trying to build up these rows and columns of trees, but you've got to be careful about leaving cards in your hand because you only score if you have the most of those cards in your hand at the end. Very clever, very cutthroat, but a lot of fun. Mandala, this is probably my favourite two-player game. Really breezy style game, but with a lot of kind of thought space. Trying to play these cards to bid for other cards, and you score points in order the way in the way you pick them up. So only the first set you pick up is worth 1 point each, and say the fifth set you pick up are worth 5 points each. Really interesting. We have Patchwork, another Uwe game that I actually really like. So I tend to lean towards the lighter Uwe games for some reason. This is probably one of my favourite polyomino style games with a cool button economy to it. We got Seven Wonders Duel, a meteor two-player game that offers a lot of experience, a lot of gameplay experience in 30 to 45 minutes. as you're building up this little civilization from scratch, really, collecting the resources and building stuff with those resources. Brilliant fun, great drafting system. We've got the Rajas of the Ganges, the Dice Charmers. So this is the roll and write version of the board game Rajas of the Ganges, of course. This one I actually think does everything that the board game does, but better, which might be blasphemous for some people, but I think that really works. Some great combos and things, and probably one of my favourite roll and writes. Speaking of roll and writes, we've got Hashi. This one's pretty unknown for a roll and write, as you're trying to connect these islands together by building these bridges. It gets very restrictive, but it works quite well. Lost Kingdoms, a pretty unknown little Kickstarter that came out last year, as you're trying to control regions for these dinosaurs. It's fine. We got Curious Cargo. This one's been really growing on me, as you are trying to connect these pipes up to basically shoot out these machines onto these lorries. Quite involved, a bit of a brain burner, but for a different pace for a two-player game, it works really well. We've got Agricola, all creatures big and small. I haven't played this one, but this is the two-player version of Agricola. And we've got Shanghaian. This is a simple little head-to-head game where you're trying to collect these cards by rolling dice, and then you only score the cards that you have more of your opponents that you have more than your opponent. So it's quite a cool scoring system in this one. And finally, we have Lawyer Up. This is a game that I really wanted to like. I've only played this one once a while ago when it first came out, and it's way too swingy, and kind of the earlier game doesn't really affect the later game as much as I would like. But I've only played the intro mission, so I need to try some of the other stuff before I get my final thoughts out. And that concludes all my collection, really. So that's everything. So a big variation here. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please hit like and subscribe to my channel, and check out my other videos too. For everyone else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye.